All right, so good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in, providing us with an hour of your time. My name is Reinaldo Gil Zambrano, and I'm gonna be pretty much your moderator today. Me and Micah are gonna be basically like running pretty much the whole show right here. But of course, you are gonna be the stars of the conversation tonight. So today in our panel discussion, we have our special guests. We're going to start with Charma Shields, celebrated author and publisher from Scavlan's books. We have also Tom Caraway, who is a poet, printer, professor, and publisher, co-founder of the Spokane Print and Publishing Center. We have also with us Sandra Williams, editor and publisher of the Black Lens News. And then we have Mary Farrell, printmaking artist and Professor Emeritus from Gonzaga University. Unfortunately, Bert couldn't join us tonight, but we're gonna continue with the conversation. Of course, it's gonna be pretty amazing. And this panel discussion is part of the Spokane Print and the Spokane Print Fest 2020. Of course, because it's 2020 is full of surprises, but we are going to be hosting this in Zoom. We're going to start by having each one of the participants doing an opening statement for 4 minutes, and then we're going to move into the discussion. Later on in the conversation, we will have also time for Q&A, where each one of you, the listeners of this panel, can offer some questions through the chat, and we're going to make sure to share those with our participants. Sounds good? All right, so we're going to start basically by offering the floor to each one of you for an opening statement. Each one of you will have 4 minutes to do it. And the main question that I would like you to consider is, what do you do and how integral is the process of printmaking in the development and impact of your work in the community? Okay, we can start with Charma, if you want to take the mic.
All right, thank you so much for having me, Reinaldo and Mike. I appreciate it so much, and happy Print Fest 2020, COVID style this year. So I am Charma. I'm a writer and a bookseller here in Spokane. I started a small press called Scavlan's Books several years ago as a way to connect with the literary community here in town and to showcase first off, our Lilac City Fairy Tales books, which coincided with a community event as well. So I'll show you kind of first off, this is one of our Lilac City Fairy Tales anthologies. It has a ton of different writers, as you can see, published in it, all from the Inland Northwest, typically. So just a lot of fun. And then we would have an event that would coincide and the money would go to Spark Central here in town. And then we kind of expanded on what we were publishing and started publishing work that I felt was innovative, exciting, and sort of unexpected. So we have some poetry books that we've published, Ram Hands and Without Warning. Hopefully you can see them. I can't quite see my little screen up there. So we have this idea that we want to publish the strange, the innovative, and also we really want to highlight Inland Northwest writers as well. We are a press fully run by women, spearheaded by myself, the writer Maya Jewel Zeller, who's our poetry editor, and Keely Honeywell, who is our very talented designer. And we have an all-woman board of directors as well. I really believe in community and in amplifying a diversity of narratives. So money we've made from the books we produced have gone back into organizations that I believe are contributing to a broader range of storytelling than we've perhaps seen in the past. And that includes, as I mentioned, Spark Central, the Carl Maxey Center, and the Salish School of Spokane. And to me, printmaking is vital because of the stories and perspectives that it amplifies, whether we're talking about printmaking as in the broadsides that we've done. And you can see this is to an Ellen Welker poem here that's actually about environmental destruction. It's called The Sea is the title of the poem. And you can see the orca in the plastic bag, and then the speaker of the poem talks about that. And we also have another one by Catherine Smith, a beautiful poem called New Vision from her book of Exodus. So these broadsides, which we printed with Type B, kind of gave us an opportunity to share a snippet in this very, I think, powerful, beautiful visual way of these poets' talent and their work and their message in their books that they're conveying. So let's see, or we could be talking about broadsides, or we could be talking more broadly about books we've printed themselves with the local printer, Grey Dog Press. Yeah, so I just really love books and stories and visual art as a way to connect with one another and understand ourselves in what I think can be a somewhat incomprehensible world at times. Language and print and art really connect us, and it's a really beautiful and peaceful and visual way to communicate, in my mind. Yeah, that's my 4 minutes.
Thank you so much, Sharma. Great. So we're gonna pass the mic to Thom Caraway now.
Awesome. Thanks, Reinaldo, for the opportunity and for the thing. Like PrintFest as an idea is great. 2020 did what it did to all things and made them worse. But this is still great. I'm happy to be able to hang out with Sharma and Mary and Sandy. So how who I am, I guess, and in my relationship to print is a longer than 4 minute story, but some of the things that I do include things like, so I work as an editor in a print journal called Rock and Sling, and this is our most recent issue that I might talk more about later. I work as a small press publisher like Sharma and do things with Sage Hill Press. Some local anthologies. This is Spokane Poetry. Also, we did Todd Marshall's Poet Laureate Project, and we do single author collections too. So this is a local writer, Ben Cartwright. We do writers from across the country as well. But most of my work, I think, for our purposes here today would be my work at the Spokane Print and Publishing Center as a letterpress printer. And that's really where I think I can talk more about printmaking. I've always been interested in prints and broadsides, especially as a poet. My background, my training is as a writer. I've published some books with local small presses, and so the word, the idea of word, the word, is very important to all of my practice as an artist. And so it doesn't show up very well, I don't think, but this print behind me here, which is an Amos Kennedy print, is kind of what I appreciate about printmaking as I practice it, which is the simple expression of a phrase or a word via printed text. And I am sad that Dr. Emerson can't be here tonight to talk to us about the scholarship and the research and the history of printmaking and print, the democratic practice of print, and all that goes into that. And I'm an amateur scholar in that area and can answer some questions that way as well. But for my own practice, so I started kind of in as a word guy with the simple expression of words using movable type and some kind of textural gestures. But lately I've been more interested in type and the form of the individual letter as an expressive artistic expression as well. And so that has led to prints like this, which actually goes like that, which is an overlay of several large pieces of type, and just the forms of the letters, right? Like we love words. We're all print people, and words are important, and we understand that. And as a poet, that's really central to my practice, and it has remained so as a printer and as a printmaker. So the simplicity of the word or of the word gesture is really interesting to me. But lately, I'm also kind of obsessed with just the form, the artistic form of the letter, and both the positive and negative. So the shape of the letter and the shape of what is left behind by the letter. So what is the letter not communicating, or what is the symbol not communicating? So that's been really central to me. And as for the work for the community, in the remaining 5 seconds of my opening, I will say the SPPC is great, and we want to teach everyone about what we love about print, whether it be letterpress or relief or book arts, or screen printing or digital printing or anything else, that it's infectious, right? And we all have things that we want to say, and the print is a really great way to express what we want to say.
Thank you so much, Tom, for your intervention. Now we're going to pass the mic to Sandra Williams.
Good evening. I'm really excited to be here. I didn't know there was a thing called Print Fest. And since I'm sort of doggedly an ambassador for a print newspaper, it was kind of, I feel like I've found my people. So I publish and edit the Black Lens newspaper, which is an African-American focused publication, independent publication that I've been publishing for going on 6 years. You know, it's focused on the people and the events and the issues that are of specific importance to the Black community, which is important in a community like Spokane, where it's hard to find critical mass of Black people to talk about the issues that are impacting us the most. So that was sort of the reason behind creating it. But as it relates to print, when I decided I was gonna do a newspaper, that was the question, whether it was gonna be print or digital, particularly in this age that we're in right now, where print newspapers are dying, major papers are dying across the country. And so I had this dilemma, and everybody suggested that I be digital. Everybody did. There was nobody that said, go print. But I've always loved the word, and I've always loved books, and I've loved the feel of holding things in my hand. And there's such a history of the Black press in this country and the power of the Black press. And it wasn't digital, it was paper. And so I just decided to take the leap and decided that I would live or die on whether I could make a print publication survive in this day and age. I guess I'm just kind of weird like that. But why? So I wrote down, like, why do I like print? So I was like, why do I like print besides that I just love holding it? What I like about it is, and why I think the Black Lens has sort of grabbed a hold of people, is that print sort of slows you down. And you're forced to take time to think and process, critical thinking. You take time. I mean, there's studies about the length of time that people spend looking at print versus stuff that's on the internet digitally. And so I think that's the biggest thing is I think because people are slowing down, that I've been able to create community. And the Black Lens has created community around this print publication, which I think has enabled it to survive. I also like the permanency of a print paper. Even when I make mistakes, which I made a lot of mistakes in those first beginning issues, and digitally you make a mistake and you can just get rid of them. And I can't get rid of my typos after they print. And there's something that's really honest about that, I think, that I really like about that. And then I think the last thing I'll say, because my time's running out, it goes really fast. So when I first started publishing the paper, I decided to make blog posts out of a couple of the articles every month, and I would post them on my website because I was trying to be technological like you're supposed to be. And so I would take the top articles and I would do a blog post. And so I did that for the first few months. And then somebody commented to me, they said, yeah, I'm really glad that you do those blog posts because, man, it's just really frustrating when you get to the end of the article and you have to turn the page and go to the 2 pages and continue to the next page. And that bothered me so much that I stopped doing it. So I figure if it's too much trouble for you to turn a page and read an article, then this is not the publication for you. So there's something about print that you have to be committed to, and that's what I like about it.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And Mary Farrell, would you like to take would you like to take your intervention?
Sure. So I'm Mary Farrell, and I'm an artist and primarily a printmaker. And what I wanted to talk about was what to me is unique about the printmaking process, why it is that I gravitate towards printmaking as an artist. And for me, printmaking is a unique way of thinking more than anything. You start with this concept that you move into some sort of an image, but then it gets put through all of the stages that you go through with this to develop the image. So you're taking whatever little sketch you've worked with and you're reimagining these marks in the strokes that would be created by these various tools that are different than you created the sketch. So woodcut tools or etching tools, and then you are doing something. So you've already transferred the image, and then you are carving it. You're going through whatever physical process you go through to make that matrix, and then after that you are proofing it, which reverses the image, so then you get to see it a little bit outside of the box, which you're always trying to do as an artist, to get a different view on it. And then you respond to it, and then you go back and make another decision, and then you come back and you proof again and you make another decision. So there's all of this wonderful call and response that goes on with the piece as you're trying to deal with the process to develop the image, which I love. I love all of the sensuous aspect of printmaking, the handling of the tools, the very physical nature of it. I want that. I think that is something that we all kind of crave right now. I love when Sandra was talking about physically holding a newspaper. I mean, everything is so physical in printmaking. And you're smelling these inks, you're in there, you're playing also with all these dichotomies that I really like. You know, there's soft ground and hard ground. There was pushing away the bubbles on a plate with nitric acid, and you're using a feather. There is clean and messy. There's push and pull. There's all of this stuff you're working back and forth. There's soft handling of a plate, and then really hard pressure as you put it through the press. So all of that is so wonderful. There's also the fact that you're creating these matrices that don't have one solution. So you can take this matrix and print it a different way or layer it on something else. So you have all of these options that are constantly pushing your image. So pushing you as you develop through the process. And then one other thing, it's just this beautiful community of people, and printmakers are a community who speak a language. It doesn't matter if you go to another country and you meet another printmaker, you speak the same language. I mean, I affectionately called Reinaldo another printmaking geek because it's that love of that printmaking language and stuff and that we all kind of get into in this very specific way that I love. So I don't know if I've used up 4 minutes, but there you go.
Thank you so much, Mary. Appreciate it. Yeah, so after listening to each one of you, it's just beautiful to see how definitely as human being, we take the stimuli from our surrounding and we take the time to somehow transform these messages into something that can be replicated for other people and to be shared. And one of the questions that actually would like to ask all of you is that with the current events of and our reality of isolation, right? And the the fast speed that we're everybody like living currently, that now somehow it started to slow down. Also, we rely so much in social media for our quick information fix or somehow finding these images that we can that can just satisfy us so fast and so quick. How relevant is the practice of producing something that is printed that somehow slow things down in order to communicate, to continue to communicate with the rest of the masses and develop community? Like, why do we still go back into just spending so much time into creating something when we can just do it so quick and it can be potentially more impactful?
Well, I mean, I can respond that I think it's about a humanity. It's about a human experience. And the craving for that and what it gives you as a human being if you actually go through the process of creating something as opposed to just responding to something out here. It's not the same experience. It isn't coming through your body. And I think that that is something that is uniquely special as a human being and important, and we all need it.
I mean, I love Sandy's story about like, oh, you're all going to read this on the blog, then you don't get it anymore, right? Like you have to seek it out, and I think that's a really important thing about print and being someone who values printed things, either in books or magazines or prints. You know, it's really easy to encounter just the garbage that floats around social media or the internet, and we interact with it in very specific ways now. And I, you know, Mary, what you said about like the physical print slows people down, and I think Sandy, you said something similar, that you have to consider it with different faculties that we I mean, our social media filters and our online news consumption filters are so ingrained and entrenched and automatic now that I think print really forces you to interact with the actual physical world in ways that are, I mean, I think surprising to some people, that they pick up a print and or a book or a newspaper and ink smudges and you can smell it, and like it's a whole, you know, it's a forgotten world almost. And I think that also slows people down, that there is a physical world in which you must interact with the ideas. It's not ephemeral. You can't just thumbs up or thumbs down it and move on with your life. And I think that's pretty important too.
I think I would add, I like what you just said, Tom. That's so true. I think the irony of what's happened with the whole pandemic and everybody being shut up is how you know, sort of shut into spaces where it would have been so easy for social media and the internet and all that stuff to just sort of feed us if it was able to do that. But I think people started discovering how lonely they were and how surfacey that was. And, you know, if you're in it all the time, then you get how surfacey, it only goes so deep. And so you know, I was doing some reading about the rediscovery of print mediums, you know, particularly by the folks that they thought would be the least interested in them, millennials. And I forget the one that comes after them. Gen Z, Gen somebody. I'm old. But they thought that they would be the ones that would most gravitate to technology and social media, which they do. But at the same time, they're also pivoting towards print and discovering the value of it. And I think a lot of that has to do with there's just an innate depth to it. And I think they're hungry, and I know that I am hungry for depth. And you get that out of print in a way that you don't get that out of faster paced mediums. And so that's what I'm noticing.
Yeah, and I am feeling everything that people are saying really hard, like almost kind of tearing up as I'm listening. I was just having this conversation with a friend. We were talking about a singer-songwriter that we both love who had an NPR Tiny Desk concert this week from her house. And she was talking about how the songs ended up making her sob because she's living alone. She misses human touch right now. And so all of the discussion tonight about the way that prints are made, the attention that we give to them, the fact that it is a tactile experience, and then when we receive them, it's a tactile experience. I don't know, there's something really beautiful about that. And I think social media can have its good points too, but I do think it frequently is almost an example of inattention and people shooting or spouting off opinions quickly. I know I've done it on there, and getting sort of an instant gratification from it or whatever. But there's something to the sitting down with something, being thoughtful and intentional about something, and having someone respond to it in a thoughtful, attentive way. Anyway, so I just find this whole discussion so moving right now. So thank you all. Yeah.
No, thank you all, definitely. So yeah, and it's great to hear each one of you from the different perspectives that you have, because it also makes me wonder a little bit about what potentially could happen in the future, and in regards to education too, and also to just human interaction in general, where we feel that for a moment we were somehow detaching ourselves from that sense of feeling, right? And spending time on crafting things and involving ourselves and our sense into creating something that eventually will be shared with others, instead of just being these quick messages, this quick thing, that you can write it or create into 5 or 4 seconds, and then it will be valuable depending on the amount of likes and depending on the amount of sharing that it gets and the attention. So yeah, no, I do appreciate each one of you's input on this. The other thing that makes me wonder too about, like, I mean, what we're talking right now is how printmaking has this, it becomes this tool for community and providing the opportunity for others to feel empowered of, like, making something that can be replicated and shared with so many people. But I would like to ask you that. So if we are talking about empowering people, creating this democracy with the messages that we create, how can we say that, I mean, social media in this case would be something that is, it makes the message even more democratic, because I mean, it can be accessible for everybody, but at the same time, like, printmaking is limited to the machinery and the access to the tools, and also being able to somehow spend the time and craft something. What are your thoughts about that, if you need to compare one or the other, and the way that it's working so far?
So I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, Reinaldo, or maybe even if I'm not, I guess the way so I feel like what Mary said about printmakers and print geeks, and what Sandy said about I feel like these are my people, like people who care deeply about the physical artifact of the word, or of word documents or of word objects, prints or newspapers or published books or what have you. In terms of building community, I think social media, and I can attest to this over quarantine, like in the spring, you know, I still feel very much like a very nascent printmaker. I'm a writer, and that's my community. But through social media, was able to connect with a lot of other printmakers who were in isolation, who were looking for ways to connect with others because they were cut off from their physical communities, in the same ways that most of us were. And so through that was able to find, you know, printmakers in Australia and in Belgium and in Germany and in Japan and kind of across the globe. But through those like social media connections and online connections, establish more of a physical relationship with, in terms of, that sounded weird, but like a tactile, what's the word? I don't know what the word is. Substantial, I guess. And so the prints on the shelves behind me here were the result of that in terms of a print exchange. It was like, hey, we just all found each other in isolation. Let's exchange prints. So we all sent prints to each other. And so I think that I feel like that's connected in some ways to the question you asked, is that like we use the democratic means, the really accessible means of social media, to create these communities that can also exist in the world in more meaningful ways, because we can exchange ideas and talk in superficial ways on social media, and even in more in-depth ways. Like I don't like plenty of substantial things happen through social media conversations, but it felt like you know, I'm now friends with Phil at Fresh Lemon Press in Australia because we've exchanged prints, right? Like I can hit the follow button on Instagram or on Twitter, or I can friend somebody on Facebook, but like, you know, until we've mailed prints to each other, like now we're print geeks together, right? I love that terminology. I'm Mary. I'm going to steal that and make a print of Print Geeks and send it to all of you. So I hope that's not weird. But I feel like it's a means of access, right? Because we need that access right now, isolated from each other. But it's also, it creates a physical connection as well, which I think is an important follow-up to that. Sorry, I ran.
No, and I just wanted to add to that, and that's another aspect, because prints are on paper. Paper is that thing. I mean, the newspaper is on paper. I mean, it's that aspect of paper that also adds a democratic element to prints, and that lets you send prints all around the world easily. You can send them cheaply. So it's that's another advantage to the print.
I think I would just add, I mean, I'm not well, I am sometimes. I was going to say I'm not against social media, but I am sometimes. But I think it's value. I think it has value. I think it's a tool. I think it's a tool that is accessible, very accessible, and I think that's important. And it can be useful. I think where I struggle with it is that there's sort of a perception that it replaces things. Like you have friends, you have 15,000 friends, you know, and I think it's like there's a perception that it's replacing relationships, and you know that you're actually learning something because you're scrolling through your news feed, and that you're actually critically aware of what's happening in the world because of what Facebook decides that you ought to see on your stream. And so, you know, my background is you know, community organizing, and you can do some stuff with social media, but you know, I hearken to the work they did in Georgia. That was some door-to-door relationship building that has happened over the past several years. That was not sending out social media posts to people. Wasn't that? And so I think there is an equalizing effect that you can have on social media, but again, it's surfacey. That stuff that's up underneath is not equal, I don't think, in the way that it is with more tangible mediums. So that would be my argument.
If I could jump in, I hear everything you all are saying, and it's great. And I just want to add that I'm a true believer in print and ink on paper of all forms. And yet through Instagram of all things, I've been exposed to, you know, people that, especially during lockdown, I wouldn't have otherwise seen. I'm thinking of Labor Camp, if any of you follow him. He does India ink drawings, posters about COVID and politics and stuff, and they're dynamite, and they really embody that democratic multiple idea, and it's got a spread or an immediate reach that's far beyond what we have or what we could do with, you know, even printing hundreds or, you know, thousands of copies on paper. At the same time, I'm an educator, and I'm trying to teach students the value of, you know, this shared struggle of getting that print to be, you know, as they intended, or how the conversation between print and their intentions, you know, changes the meaning. I'm a fan of both. I mean, not a fan of social media, sorry, but I can abide what social media does to the greater good or benefit of people that are engaged in print, art, word, craft. That's all.
All right, thank you, Mike. Just by the way, tomorrow at 7, right? Mike Sonnichsen is gonna be live from his studio, showing some approaches of letterpress with using Legos. So if you're curious about that, you can get to see Mike Sonnichsen in action too. But you know, going back to what we were discussing about information, you know, like especially during this time that we have so much access to information, there is so much out there that it creates this sense of misinformation many times. Like, what would you say is important to continue bringing more news, continue to publish more stories and more poets, when it seems that there is just a saturation of all these things around us? Why is it still important to continue doing that?
That feels like a Sandy question.
I felt like everybody was looking at me. Why is it important? Because the stories are important. You know, I think the stories are important. I think the voices are important. I think there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise. And one of the things that I try to do, I hope I do it effectively, is to distill out the noise and get down to some real voices, some real substance. And that's part of the slowing stuff down so that you can filter out the cacophony and really hear some singular voices talking about some things that are really important that I think in this time, in this place, in this moment, that we need to be hearing. So that's why I think it's important, you know. there's so much stuff. People are really inundated. I think that's part of the problem, quite frankly, is that people are being inundated by so much stuff that it's hard to get to the core of what's important right now. So I call it, my daughter does fashion, and she said there's fast fashion and slow fashion, and the industry's gravitating towards fast fashion. Everything's gravitating towards fast fashion, and she's sort of a fan of slow fashion. That's probably because she's my kid, right? But there's something valuable about that. There's just something valuable about the taking a breath and exhaling and listening, not hearing, but listening. So I think that's why it's important.
And I think that, you know, as fast as technology wants to make everything go, we're still human, and there's still, nature has a pace. And I think that every time we connect back to that humanity, we're touching on something that's really life affirming and extremely important for humanity as we move ahead. And I think that we each and every one have something unique to say. It doesn't matter how many times people have touched on the same topic through history. You know, we all each have something unique that we can contribute. And regardless, I think it's in the doing of it that's important. The putting a word to paper, putting an image to paper, just the fact that you are doing it, I think is where the value lies. I think that is an incredibly important activity to put into the world right now. And for that, it has value.
And for all the, I mean, I teach the intro to letterpress classes at Spokane Print and Publishing, and most of them are people who come in with a thing to say, with one thing, a quote or a slogan or just a phrase that they want to say, and that thing could very easily be said on Twitter or on Facebook, and it's meaningless because it gets so quickly washed away in the noise that you know, Sandy and Mary talking about, that just putting those words on a piece of paper and the intentionality behind that process, I think, is really meaningful to people. You know, as Mary described, that, you know, you make a sketch and you proof it and you make decisions and you proof it again and you make decisions and you keep proofing it, and it's never really done. You can keep working with it or applying different colors, and I think that decision-making process, that intentionality, it makes it markedly different than a social media post where you could say a thing and get a broadcast to 100,000 people if it goes viral. Okay. But getting back to that idea that Michael mentioned of democratic multiples, and that entire, like, the concept behind that also includes that intentionality, that there is someone crafting this message who is taking the time to arrange the letters and to apply the ink and to apply the paper and to distribute it. And that's you know, give me a wheat paste wall over a Facebook feed like any day of the week. Like, I will consume every one of those posters because somebody wanted me to see that. It wasn't just some like 2 a.m. like, oh my God, like keyboard mashing. Like it required a lot of forethought. It required a lot of process. And I think that process is meaningful as well.
That process gives a person agency, I think, as opposed to being just sort of a digital data cog in the wider social media world.
Right. I mean, that was my thinking just now, is that so much of what we see on social media and what drives Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all of these different companies is the bottom dollar and capitalism. And I don't think any of us and I could be wrong. Tom might be in it for the riches. He looks like, I mean, he put on a fancy shirt tonight, so it's possible. But I think there are, I think we are trying to amplify the stories being told, because sometimes it is a very narrow perspective that is dominant. And I think there's always room for more voices, always room for more, for a larger readership. And I think it's awesome to encourage people to engage in that artistic process and to publish them, to help get their work out there, to help diversify all of the stories. We need as many stories as we can. We really do. I think storytelling is the major way, and in whatever way that we're attempting to do that, I think it's the major way that we can learn to understand ourselves and understand others.
Yeah, and also I would like to add to that the fact that when you're printing something, you're also taking into the space, right? It's not something that is just accessible through your phone, that you can just turn off and it's not part of your reality anymore. But the fact that you are incorporating the printing matter into the space, it's a book that you can open, it's a poster that is somehow modifying that environment that is surrounding you. It just makes it a little bit more like real and also impactful too, for sure. And those stories, right, that we can collect into a book and eventually give them like this tangible thing that people can feel that they have an impact into the environment where they live, because they are now, their stories are in this physical thing that can be shared with people.
Yeah, well, I loved it, Reinaldo, how you talked about not everybody has access to the equipment for printmaking. Not everybody has access to the time to sit down and make art. And I think that's why it's important that there are people like you, like Tom, who are investing in that equipment and making it available to so many people in Spokane who wouldn't have had access to it otherwise. I think that's really outstanding. Anyway, so good job, everybody.
Go ahead, Tom.
I was just saying thank you to Spokane Arts for agreeing with Sharma and believing in our mission.
Yeah. And that's the exciting thing, right? Because all these things are happening in Spokane, you know, and that's something that I would like to guide our conversation now, because Spokane is a city that we call home now. Last night we had an Instagram live with Ben Munoz, who is an artist in Texas, Dallas, Texas. We had one of the studio visits, the virtual studio visits, and now tomorrow Mike is going to be doing. And one thing that actually made me feel really good was that even when Dallas is, you know, it's this big city that has a lot of art coming out, the art community is really solid right there. They sell pieces like crazy. There is not a printmaking publishing center, for example. There is not a community print shop. There is not like all these different things, right, that somehow can make the community available to the community for them to continue telling their stories and have access to education and have the opportunity to use the materials to tell their own visual narratives, you know, and be part of the visual discussion later on. So, I mean, that's one of those things that made me feel really proud, right, of what is happening. And listening to each one of you, right, the black lens, right, like being printed in town, Spokane Print Publishing Center, and all the different publishing materials that Sharma and Tom have been doing. It's just made me feel really, really good about what is going on, and also makes me excited about the students around this area that potentially can use these tools to continue striving to tell their own stories. And maybe they don't need to travel to a big city to do it. They can do it right here and continue to enrich the identity, right? Our artistic identity that's happening here in Spokane. But with all this, I mean, in that note, right, with all these amazing things that are happening here, I would like to hear from each one of you, what are your thoughts about the future in Spokane? what do you think, what are those hopeful feelings that you're having and these dreams? What do you see happening right now that potentially can continue to contribute to our city and develop, this thing that is going to continue to enrich not only the city, but the region in general?
Okay, I'll dive in. I actually want to give a shout out to Spokane Arts. Yay. So my passion is print, and I've been trying to figure out how do I introduce print to more digital techie people. And so I got a grant from Spokane Arts Foundation to do a special insert in the February Black History Month paper, which is going to be a photo display of Black people in Spokane. It's called Black in Spokane, Black people in Spokane, but embedded in the photographs is an AR app, augmented reality, so that when they hold their phone over the photo, then there's going to be a video that comes to life that tells the stories of these people. So, but you can only get it if you get the print paper. I'm not going to put it online. So in terms of the future, I'm really excited about figuring out ways to stay true to print and sort of coax people into it. Do you know what I'm saying? And I'm really excited about that. So I'm really excited about this because I think there's a way. I consider myself a dinosaur in some ways, but sort of a dinosaur that sees the future. Maybe, I don't know. And I think it's those kind of things that are possible in a place like Spokane. I feel hopeful about being able to experiment with other things like that. I'm asked a lot, how long are you going to keep doing the Black lens? Those kind of questions. And so my response is, as long as I don't have to go digital. So as long as I can afford for it to be a print publication, all things being equal, it will stay intact. I'm committed to that, but I'm also committed to figuring out ways that print can blossom. And so that's the future that I see, and I'm actually really excited about that.
So I wanted to say, first I want to say hello, Olivia. And in the 25 years that I've been here in Spokane, I can say that in the past 6-7 years, whatever, there is just a dynamic energy that is happening now, a really intensive creative confluence, I think. I mean, there have been over the years like one gallery here, one thing going on over there, but now there just seems to be an energy that is really strong and really exciting. And it's over all kinds of areas. In writing, of course, for me as a printmaker, the Spokane Print and Publishing Center is so exciting to have that going on. I think that's exciting for students to have, this in town too, to know that this is here once they graduate. But there's a palpable energy of exciting groundwork going on that I can certainly feel, and I think other people can feel it too. And that generates more stuff going on. The more that's happening, the more stuff grows out of it.
I've seen a huge change in Spokane from when I was a kid growing up here. And I'm not sure if that's because of the spaces I somewhat existed in Spokane, or if it's just really become that much more of an artistic, literate city in a way. But I remember when I first moved back here and got to meet Luke and Ginger with Terrain, and saw all the great things that Spokane Arts were doing, and listening to, I think, Ginger talking one night about how a lot of people, like I did when I was 18, the minute they graduated from high school, were leaving here as young people, and Spokane was just sort of hemorrhaging young people, and I never thought I would come back, and now I'm so glad I did, and I see so much potential here, and I keep hoping that that it just continues, and I'm really excited that it will. And I look around now, and my children are 8 and 11, and I used to think, I hope when they are old enough, they feel brave enough to leave. And now I think I'm excited for them if they stay as well. I think there's so much beautiful work happening here, and I think they can really contribute to some wonderful art if they want to. They can contribute to wonderful organizations of all sorts here, and I'm just so excited by everyone who's on this panel tonight and hearing you talk, and it just makes me feel grateful. So thank you all.
Yeah, I guess I would just echo what everyone has said. I had a few experiences as when I was Poet Laureate for Spokane years ago now, but interacting with other city laureates, including like Poets Laureate of Los Angeles, or of Chicago, or even Seattle, the Civic Poet, and San Antonio, and bigger cities or similar sized cities. But I guess we're always the same size as like a city. Like, I don't know why people say Spokane and San Antonio in the same sentence. Those feel like very, very different cities, different size and different everything. But the Poets Laureate of those cities, Boise, would be like, Spokane has a Poet Laureate? Like, what are you guys doing with a Poet Laureate? And I was like, shut up. Like, you don't know what's going on. And I feel like that has only continued since then. And that was, 7 or 8 years ago now, from the early days of Terrain to what we have now, which is a really thriving community supported by a civic arts agency like Spokane Arts, and supported by artists of many different mediums, who can work together and do interesting things together in a way that really changes the landscape. And I think that's a really signifying thing, I think, for Spokane right now, is that like you can make a difference. Like you can show up and say, I want to start a newspaper for the Black community because there isn't one, and it will mean something and it will be successful, right? Or you can say, I want to start a small press that focuses on local writers because there is a shit ton of awesome local writers, and that press can be successful in a small press kind of way. Or you can show up from wherever you're from and say, I want to make prints that are meaningful to the community and be part of something, like Reinaldo has, and that can work, right? You can do that. Like you can make your mark in this community still, and make a difference, and partner with the Thaler School, and partner with all these different really great organizations, Spark Central, that really make a lasting impact on the community. Whereas if you're in a bigger city, if you're in a Chicago, you're in Dallas, you're in a Portland or a Seattle, like good luck. Like you might scratch the surface of a neighborhood, but you're not going to necessarily make a thing that leaves the kind of lasting impression that Spokane is so eager for right now. So I think that's a really important kind of part of Spokane's emergingness is that the artists are so present. Sharma, we're so glad you came back. We hope all of the artists continue to stay here from now on. And we stop that hemorrhaging, right? Because you can stay here and make a difference and do something important. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you for sharing and answering that question. It just makes me feel really excited about, the things that are happening here. And I just been here for 3 years. So I'm a newbie, but it's just fascinating what is happening there. And I don't know. And it's something that is kind of the energy that I would like to continue sharing with my students eventually. But yeah, so let's see. Let's open up for questions from the public. If you want to, it seems that we're a small group. So if you want to just like unmic yourself, or maybe you can just write it on the chat and just do that. If you have any questions for our panel.
I have a question just for Thom, although it might apply for other people also, but I was just curious when, because I feel like you were talking about your work, like getting more focused on sort of the visual aspect or the form of like just a letter instead of the word. And I wonder if you think that is something that like you would have kind of naturally like shifted into as you were like in this like process of getting to know letterpress, or if you think there's something about that that is a response to like whether it's so much content or whether like, is there something about this year or this time, or is this just sort of a like, is this a step? Does everyone do this in letterpress where you get really into?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, and it's very much on my mind right now. I've gotten to the point, like I'm still very shy about calling myself a printmaker or even a print artist, because I'm so new to it, and I feel like I'm still making all the mistakes, and I don't feel super developed. But I'm making basically a Me the Print Artist website, so it's like about me, and I'm like, holy shit, like I've never thought about myself as a print artist before. How do I even think about that? So those questions have been really on my mind, and I absolutely do not think that I would have come to where I am now in thinking about words and letter forms without letterpress. That my practice as an artist, and I don't know what would have happened. Like, I don't know what writers are doing right now. Like, I can't write a damn thing. Like, I've written about 15 lines of poetry in the last 9 months. And honestly, probably in the last 3 years, because the whole political climate has just like crushed my will to put words together in any kind of meaningful way. Part of that is like, I think like as as a middle-aged straight presenting white dude, I should just shut the hell up for a while. And so it hasn't been that important to me to write poems, because basically it's not my time to write poems, and I don't know that I have anything that meaningful to say. And so printmaking and letterpress has really kind of been a fallback for me that has become really primary during quarantine, in that I couldn't write if I had to. In fact, I do have to, and I still can't. Sharma, I don't know how a book came out during all this for you. You're amazing. And so having letterpress and having that kind of printmaking and being able to focus in on the minutia of a letter form or of a single word or of a single color and how it interacts with the paper has been life-giving for me. And I don't know what would have happened otherwise. I would have kept a winery in business probably. But yeah, I mean, so it's really changed how I think about myself as an artist of any kind, much less as a printmaker.
Thom, can I respond? I've been doing a lot of pieces where I'm taking poets' poems, but I'm writing their text over and over and over each other so that it's a pattern in the end. The poem is contextual. And I've sort of been thinking, how is that for the poet, what I'm doing with their work, because you can't read it. So it's really interesting to me that you as the poet are seeing the beauty in just that form of the letter. I totally get that. So it's like coming from the other side of using those words as forms in and of themselves, that they have meaning just because you are putting them there on the paper, which is a whole different way of responding to them as the literal word that we are reading. And to me, in my head, I'm thinking it expands the meaning.
Yeah, that's great. I love that, Mary. That's beautiful. And speaking for all poets, we love what you're doing. Blend us all. I mean, that's what we want, right? Blend our voices together until you can't hear any individual one of us, but you're still overwhelmed by the presence and the combination of the words. I think that's that's wonderful. I love that.
Cool.
Right. Let's see, do we have any other questions?
Can I ask Sandy a question? Just kind of a technical question. So I'm just curious, what is the process for printing the paper, printing the Black Lens News? What printer do you use here in town?
I use, I'm trying to think, they're the print company for the Lewiston Tribune paper. And I can't think of what their local name is, but they spun off a printing press company. So I started with Garland, and I want to give Garland Printing a shout out because Garland was my first printer 5.5 years ago, and I knew nothing about what I was doing. And so I wish I remembered his name, but the wonderful man who was running the printing press kept sending my stuff back and saying, maybe you want to do this, maybe you want to do that. And then he eventually gave me a template, which I actually still use. I just change it to the next month and add stuff to it. So wonderful, wonderful man. I have his name written down somewhere, but I've never forgotten that. Who knows what that first issue would have looked like absent that. But yeah, so that's who I use. And it's an interesting, I think, every month my daughter I tell her I'm going to quit. And she says, well, that's what you said last month. But it really is, I am appreciating, Mary, what you're saying about the touch of it and the smell of it and all of that. I think that's what keeps me coming back. There's just something, because you put so much of yourself into it, every month, that it's like, how can you let that go? I don't know. But yeah, so did I answer your question? I don't even remember.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other questions from our listeners?
I guess like Tom sort of answered this question a second ago, but I'm just very curious as to, I showed up a little bit late, so I apologize for not hearing everybody's first little introductions. But with COVID 2020 just being like a hard year for a lot of people, almost everyone, I want to say in some sort of way. Personally, like when it first hit, I had a hard time being creative. I had a hard time, even before the Black Lives Matter movement started really getting recognition and light the way that it does now, and other political issues and other just social issues, and with COVID and leadership and politics, etc. How has that impacted your art and like your creativity, and has it kind of changed the way that you're producing art right now? In printmaking or writing or whatever it is that you use as an outlet, especially.
mean, I can say for my writing personally, I couldn't write at all. I was like Tom. I had a book come out in 2019 and was just at the tail end of publicizing it, thankfully, when COVID struck. And I was about 88 pages into a new novel. And then my kids' school shut down. We were doing the virtual learning from home. And I think what ended up happening is I ended up falling into a pretty big depression, but I also think my concentration was just shot by kind of the shock of all the change at once. And I had a really hard time being able to sit with something and read something, let alone write something. Like usually I'm a pretty voracious reader of novels, and I could maybe count on one hand how many novels I've read this year. So, and I've just started to be, I'm better. I started writing again about a month ago. I now have 97 pages instead of 88 of the novel, so it's coming along. But I will say I had so much fun this year publishing. Scablands did publish a book. We published Baby Speaks Salish. You can see it on the screen there. Can't quite tell. Which is this gorgeous book put out by Emma Noyes. And she has Salish language, Salish language. It's kind of an instruction manual for families that want to share Colville Okanagan Salish with their children. And it also has this beautiful essay about learning the language herself that she hadn't had the opportunity to learn when she was a child. It's really beautiful. And that was, having that project, I think, was one of the things that helped me feel at least like I was doing a little something, or had something fun to kind of work with and concentrate on. And I think it almost helped that it wasn't my own work, that I was kind of helping shepherd another book into the world. And you know, Emma did all the work. It's like her drawings, her book, and then I have a designer who designs for me. But yeah, I think creativity was really, for me, was really hard. Has been really hard. And honestly, if I didn't have a therapist and if I weren't medicated, I don't think I would have started writing again.
Yeah, for me, just having a couple of deadlines really forced me into action. If it weren't for that, I could have wallowed. But it did turn out to be a pretty productive summer once we sort of got over the first wave of things. But I didn't post a lot of it on social media because of all the politics and stuff that was going on. I didn't feel like what I was doing necessarily meant as much as other things. So it's a new and entirely different dynamic in which we work, but just try and keep working somehow.
And to respond to Sharma, I totally understand feeling just despondent during this period. I mean, there's just so much that is, well, we've been under this constant horror for 4 years politically, and now, you know, and then having all the uncertainty and constantly being surrounded by so much anxiety, you know, carrying this anxiety all the time. I know for myself early on, so I had the odd thing that I retired in the spring. So I retired, which is a big life transition. At the same time, this hit. So it was just a very odd, you know, hard to assess what is related to retiring and what is related to just bizarre isolation, you know, during this period. But just to answer your question, Olivia, I mean, initially, I started doing work where I was consciously thinking I'm responding to this, and that just never works for me. I think that I just have to keep making work, which for me is I just have to be doing it. And later it will come through me how this has affected me. I can't consciously be thinking about it. I just have to be seeing how the input is in there in my work. And I think, like Michael said, I've had deadlines. I've had shows that were canceled that now were happening that, thank God, I had these going on. So I was producing work in relation to that. And then I can look back at the work later and go, oh my God, look at what I was doing in that piece. Look at how those pieces are showing this sense of isolation. Look what's happening in them. That's where it comes through. It comes through later.
Yeah, and just to, like, I couldn't write a poem about what's going on right now if I had to. In fact, I kind of had to because somebody asked me for a poem and it's god awful. Like, it's going to come out and be published soon, and I'm going to be embarrassed by it because I don't know how to think about this stuff yet. Like, it's still in process, right? But as a letterpress person, like, I can arrange a word or two or just play around with letter forms. Yeah, Mary, I think that, like, when it's all over, like, I might be able to think in a systematic way or in a way that I can process directly through like poetry. But like right now I can't. And so like letterpress and printmaking has really given me a way to process like immediate things in a more productive way. Yeah.
What about for you, Sandy?
Yeah, you beat me to it. It's an interesting question for me to answer. I think in terms of the COVID stuff, you know, I'm pretty much an introvert. And so for the first few weeks, it was like, woohoo. I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to talk to anybody. Nobody's calling me because they're all hunkered down and score. Then people discovered Zoom and that was over. So, you know, so it didn't really change anything for me. I noticed a lot of people were having a hard time. I was only having a hard time because my daughter's in New York. So emotionally that was hard. In terms of the other stuff though, you know, I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but, you know, I have lived my whole life sort of turning that stuff off. Because, you know, as a Black person in this country, you can't survive if you don't figure out really early on how to do that. So there have been very few instances where I have opened that door up. And it has typically been when a few of us have gotten together. We've sort of let our guards down all at the same time. And those have been pretty emotional times. But for the most part, there's no connection between me and what's happening. It's just because opening that door makes it impossible to do anything. And like a couple of you've mentioned, deadlines are the best because it doesn't make any difference what's happening. The election doesn't matter, you know, racial protest doesn't matter. None of it matters. I have a deadline at the end of every month. My dad died and I had a deadline, you know, it just doesn't matter. And so in some ways that's a beautiful thing because it doesn't matter how I feel about anything, I still have to put this paper out every month. And so that's what my focus is on. And I think that has made it doable in ways that it wouldn't have been otherwise.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So let's see. I thought that I saw Katie. Maybe Katie wanted to say something or pitching into the discussion.
Hi. I did, or I was going to ask about, like, people mentioned community a lot, and I was wondering, like, what ways you would like to see your, like, connection with print in the community change in the future, like what your aspirations are for that.
Well, I'd like everyone here to become a member of Spokane Print and Publishing Center and come hang out with us. So that's, I mean, that's what we're all about, right? Is getting people in and learning new print techniques and learning all kinds of things about how to do these kinds of things. Or if you're a printmaking student who's graduated from a place like Gonzaga, to come continue your craft at SPPC, because that's what we're outfitted for. But honestly, like, having people in a community space and doing interesting things and playing off of each other. I'd love to see Sharma's kids in there and see what they come up with, because they're great and they'd have a lot of fun, but also, like, you know, having artists interacting in a space, they all learn from each other, whether those artists are people like Mary or people like Reinaldo, or whether they're Sharma's kids. Like, I'm going to learn from Sharma's kids as much as I learned from Reinaldo, probably. And just having that kind of collaboration. So, like, just people collaborating in a space is what I want to see in Spokane's artistic future.
And I think I'd like to see more people take the leap and create their own things. I think it was Mary that was talking about being a creator. And how valuable it is to be a creator. I have a hat that says creator on the front. I got it at a conference I went to, and I love it. It's my favorite hat because I believe that there's a power in that. And I think the more people, the more community we have, more creator community we have in Spokane, the better the Spokane is going to be. So that's what I hope for. Whatever they create, doesn't matter, just create something.
Yeah, I will second that from Sandy. I feel that the tools are here. There is so many resources that are pretty much open for everybody to start developing things. I mean, we have Spokane Arts that have been sustaining so many of the dreams that the people in this panel have been developing. And it's great, you know, because somehow what Tom was mentioning before, like each one of, I mean, our youth can potentially have a proactive participation in this city, develop things that can find, that can help them out to find their own people and their community, and empower them to continue spreading the love for whatever they like to do with others, you know, and that's something that I feel that can continue happen. Another thing too that I would like to see also in Spokane is a little bit like, I mean, this doesn't happen too much, but I noticed in some of my students in the past that there is a sense of comparison, right? Like we're comparing like, oh, this is Spokane, which should be like, oh, it's not like Seattle, it's not like New York, it's not like whatever. But it's somehow kind of like just taking ownership, but this is what it is, and the identity is somehow growing, and you can be a participant of that identity that is growing. You can contribute to it. So it will be kind of like not just like comparing for comparing. It will be like just appreciating for what it is, offer feedback, and try to contribute and into making it better. I will just say that, because the resources are here. There's so many things that you can do. I just loving the chat here. Creator community. That needs to happen in the print, Tom. We need to do that.
I've already got to do like print geeks. Now I got to do creator community too. Okay, I'll do it.
All right.
It's about time. Like SPPC and Blacklands, we need to collaborate on something.
Yeah.
Everybody working together. I like it.
That's another thing too, you know, like definitely more collaboration.
Yeah.
Within people, for sure. You know, and maybe invite also our folks from Moscow, you know, they feel kind of isolated there. Maybe we can invite them to come to the dark side of Spokane, you know, and the fun side here, and do cool stuff with us too.
For sure. And broadsides, yes, Mike, that's right. Broadsides all day. I love resin. My whole wall here.
That's great. Okay, so let's see. That's pretty much like an hour and a half. So is there any other last thoughts or last questions? Because I know that everybody here is pretty busy. So this is your time to do it now. Okay. So, well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for the panelists for sharing your time and your expertise into enriching this beautiful conversation. Thank you to each one of our listeners, and also for each one of you for your contribution and for your question. Thank you, Spokane Arts, Micah Maloney, for sustaining also this, preparing this panel and supporting this this festival and this program, you know, that have been kind of like beat up this year. You know, I think we jinxed it when we put the 2020 on the title of the thing. That was it. But I mean, thank you so much. That makes me really hopeful for the future, because somehow one idea can be sustained by so many different organizations in order to bring everybody together. And that way we can also get to know other people like Sandy Williams. I didn't know you, and now I know you, and I know that we're going to be seeing each other and collaborating in the future for sure. Because this is the part of the essence of Spokane Print Fest. Bringing people together, sharing the passion for printmaking and printed matter, and also allowing the community to somehow get closer to this thing that we love so much. So thank you again for everything. It's great to see you all. That will be like, good night, everybody.
Yeah.